Well, the U.S. has very large deficits, about 9% of the economy, and mounting debt burdens, about 15.5 trillion and growing at record rates. But we need to understand the difference between the short-term deficit challenge and the structural deficit challenge. We have high unemployment and even higher underemployment right now. We have a weak economic recovery. And so therefore one has to be careful not to cut spending too quickly and not to increase taxes in the face of that weak economic recovery and set of employment challenges. At the same point in time, the true threat to the United States and to many other major industrialized nations are not the current deficits. It's the large and growing structural deficits that lie ahead that are driven by known demographic trends, rising healthcare costs, outdated tax systems. And so what we need to do in the United States is to address both. We need to take steps to deal with the short-term challenge without compromising the recovery and our efforts to get unemployment down. And we need to make some structural reforms that get phased in over time that will address the true threat to our future, which are the structural deficits. My view is that we need to be taking steps on both fronts, the short-term and the structural. The problem is the U.S. is not taking steps on the structural, and in some European countries, they're moving very quickly to try to cut spending and to raise revenues, which could complicate short-term economic recovery. And so I think that both sides of the Atlantic need to adjust their current course to pursue a more prudent and sustainable approach. It's very difficult to be able to make tough transformational changes in the United States unless you have committed and inspirational presidential leadership and pressure from the public for the two political parties to be able to work together to solve problems. And so I think in the United States, we need to not only engage in fiscal reforms, we need to engage in political reforms, because at the present point in time, we have a dysfunctional democracy. The Republicans don't want to increase revenues. The Democrats don't want to renegotiate the social insurance contract. There are exceptions, but that's the general party line view. We're going to have to do both and much more in order to restore fiscal sanity. The truth is, a lot of elected officials like the way that things are right now because it enables them to be able to do things that people want without having to disclose the longer-term implications of those actions. Many politicians, I think wrongfully, believe that people can't handle the truth. And I think that they believe that people, human nature being what it is, want as much as they can get without having to pay for it. On the other hand, with elective office comes a responsibility to provide the truth and to provide leadership to help people understand that we cannot continue to live for today because of the potential adverse consequences that we'll have on our children, our grandchildren, and future generations tomorrow. So I think the biggest deficit, quite frankly, that we have in many countries is a leadership deficit. The accounting profession, or the accountability profession as I refer to it, has a unique opportunity, and I would argue obligation, to lead in this area, because how you keep score matters, and how you keep score will have a tremendous impact on the actions that others take, and the ability to hold them accountable, not just for things that they do, but very importantly, things that they fail to do to address large, known, and growing problems that we face. I believe that the ratings agencies need to modernize their own practices because they are too short-sighted and they do not give adequate consideration to huge off-balance sheet obligations that represent a very real threat to fiscal sustainability. Obviously, the ratings agencies did a poor job in the face of the mortgage-related subprime crisis. There were too many people that relied upon those ratings, and they turned out to be false ratings. So the first thing I think the ratings agencies need to do is to modernize their own practices. in order to focus much more attention on fiscal sustainability, including the structural deficit and debt challenges that represent a threat to many major industrialized nations that under the current approach is not adequately addressed. And then secondly, I think once they lead by example and do that themselves, then I think they need to put more pressure, and it will be a logical consequence to be able to put more pressure on countries to start addressing these large known and growing problems. And if they fail to do so, it will have a consequence on their rating. You know, as you know, Standard & Poor's is one of 3 major ratings agencies that lowered the rating for the United States. And you would have thought that that would have had major repercussions to U.S. policymakers. It really didn't have major repercussions yet. And the other 2 rating agencies didn't follow suit. They maintained their rating. But in that particular case, Standard & Poor's said they didn't do it just because of the numbers. They did it because of the political dysfunctionality of our system, which brings me back to the fact that we don't just need fiscal reforms, we need governance reforms and political reforms in order to be able to create a better future.